My dad humiliated me in front of my brother's boss, and I never imagined how fast karma would strike. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Sarah Dalton. I'm in my mid-20s, working hard to build my career. For a few weeks, I was staying with my dad and brother while I looked for a new apartment. My dad, Harvey Dalton, has always been overbearing. He criticizes everything I do and never misses a chance to make me feel small. My brother, Evan, is oblivious most of the time, always trying to impress people, especially his boss, Gregory Miles. One evening, I was invited to a work dinner with Evan and Gregory. I wanted to make a good impression, but my dad had other plans. From the moment we sat down, he started mocking me. He made jokes about my job, my choices, even my looks. Everyone laughed awkwardly. I wanted to disappear. Evan just fidgeted, clearly embarrassed, but he didn't say a word. Gregory, I noticed, was quiet, watching Harvey with a raised brow. I left the dinner early, feeling crushed. Later, I learned that Evan had been taking credit for work he didn't do. My dad's mocking had lit a fire inside me. I decided to quietly collect evidence of Evan's lies and mistakes. I made sure everything was clear and undeniable. When I finally showed Gregory the proof, he was shocked. Evan couldn't explain himself. The next day, he was fired on the spot. My dad watched in disbelief, and I finally felt a quiet satisfaction. Sometimes, the ones who humiliate you don't see how fast karma can arrive. A week later, Evan invited me to a dinner with his boss, Gregory Miles, as a kind of family introduction. I wanted to be polite and supportive, hoping to leave a good impression. I dressed carefully and tried to stay calm, but the moment we arrived, I could feel tension in the air. My dad, Harvey, was already acting distant, his eyes scanning the room with a hint of judgment. From the start, it was obvious that Harvey didn't think much of this gathering. He made small comments that sounded like jokes but carried sharp edges. "Sarah, are you sure you remembered how to hold a fork?" he asked casually, smirking. I forced a smile, feeling my cheeks burn. Evan kept shifting in his seat, clearly embarrassed but silent, while Gregory watched politely, though I could sense his curiosity about this strange family dynamic. Throughout dinner, Harvey continued with subtle digs. He questioned my career choices, lightly mocking my achievements without making it too obvious for others to call him out. Each jab was like a pinprick, and I had to swallow hard to keep my composure. I tried steering conversations to safe topics, talking about Evan's work and achievements, hoping to defuse the tension. Gregory was polite but attentive, and I noticed he noticed my dad's sarcasm. Every laugh from Harvey felt like it weighed me down, yet I reminded myself to stay strong. By the end of the evening, I realized my father's behavior wasn't just embarrassing, it was deliberate. But instead of breaking me, it planted a quiet resolve. I promised myself I wouldn't let his mockery define me. I would find a way to prove that I belonged here, even if Harvey and his arrogance didn't see it. As dinner progressed, Harvey grew bolder. His comments about my career became sharper, disguised as jokes. "Oh, Sarah, still juggling those tiny projects," he said, chuckling. "I guess not everyone can make it big." The words landed like cold blows, and I felt every eye at the table on me. The room fell into an awkward silence, broken only by nervous laughter from a few guests trying to fill the tension. Evan's face turned red. He shifted uncomfortably in his chair but didn't speak up. I could see the hesitation in his eyes. He wanted to defend me but feared provoking our father. My heart sank, realizing my own brother wouldn't be my shield tonight. Gregory, Evan's boss, remained quiet. I caught his gaze several times, noting the subtle disappointment etched across his face. He didn't join the laughter, didn't react to Harvey's mockery, and I realized he was judging the man at the table, not me. The thought gave me a tiny sense of relief. I tried to ignore Harvey, focusing on the conversation around me, but each comment cut deeper than the last. He spoke about my failures as if they were entertainment, comparing me to Evan's accomplishments, making it clear I was the lesser sibling. By the time dessert arrived, the humiliation had stacked heavily on my chest. Yet, underneath the sting, a sense of clarity emerged. I understood something important. Harvey's behavior wasn't just rude, it revealed the truth about who he valued and who he thought was worth his praise. For the first time that evening, I felt a quiet determination rise inside me. I wouldn't stay a victim of his insults. I would find a way to turn this situation around, and I promised myself I would never let his arrogance go unchallenged. After one particularly sharp remark from Harvey, I couldn't take it anymore. My chest tightened, my stomach churned, and every laugh around the table felt like it was aimed straight at me. I felt smaller than I had ever felt in my life. The embarrassment was suffocating. Without a word, I pushed back my chair and stood up, excusing myself. My legs felt unsteady as I walked out of the room, struggling to breathe through the mix of anger and shame. Evan hesitated for a moment, glancing between me and our father, but he didn't speak. Finally, he trailed behind me, quiet and unsure. He wanted to follow me, to say something, but his voice failed him. I didn't need comfort from him, I just needed to get out of that oppressive atmosphere. Once in the hallway, I leaned against the wall, closing my eyes. I could still hear Harvey's chuckle from inside, smug and self-satisfied, believing he had made his point. He had no idea that the words he tossed around carelessly had done more than just embarrass me, they had sparked something I hadn't felt before. That night, I sat alone in my room, replaying every word, every glance, every laugh. The humiliation stung, but slowly, it began to morph into determination. I realized I couldn't let him or anyone else define my worth. Harvey thought he had won. He thought he had crushed me. But beneath the hurt, a plan began to form. I would show him, and Evan, that underestimating me was a mistake. That night, between the anger and the shame, I felt the first flicker of a quiet, unstoppable resolve. The next day, I couldn't stop thinking about the dinner. I stayed at Evan's apartment under the pretense of helping him with some errands. While he stepped out to make a call, I overheard a conversation between him and a coworker on speaker. My heart sank as I realized the truth. Evan had been exaggerating his work, claiming successes that weren't his. Worse, he was taking credit for a project that was already failing. I listened carefully, piecing together how he had misled Gregory and the rest of the team. The frustration I felt wasn't just about him lying, it was that he had been benefiting from dishonesty while I had been struggling to prove myself through hard work. Later, I ran into Gregory briefly at the office lobby. I didn't approach him, but I overheard him talking to a colleague. He praised integrity and emphasized that mistakes were understandable, but dishonesty was not. He expected accountability and had little patience for anyone trying to cover up failures. The pieces clicked in my mind. If Evan had been taking shortcuts and pretending to shine, and Gregory valued honesty above all, then the gap between appearance and reality was enormous. I realized that my father's mocking might have been humiliating, but it also made me pay attention. I now understood exactly where Evan's weaknesses lay, and I could see the opportunity to ensure the truth came to light. It was a mix of disbelief and clarity. The brother I had once admired was not the person I thought he was. And Gregory, unknowingly, had set the perfect conditions for what I could do next. In that moment, I felt a quiet certainty. The next steps wouldn't be easy, but the path forward was clear. Once I understood what Evan had been doing, I decided to take action without telling anyone. I spent the next few days paying close attention to everything around his workplace. Since I had been helping him with small tasks, no one questioned my presence. I moved quietly, observing details he thought no one noticed. I began collecting proof of his mistakes. I found files showing deadlines he had missed, tasks he ignored, and notes from frustrated clients. Some of the reports he submitted looked polished on the surface, but a closer look revealed numbers that didn't match earlier drafts. I saved each version carefully, building a timeline that showed exactly where he changed information to make himself look better. I also checked emails he left open, noticing messages from team members asking for updates he never sent. There were complaints from clients whose projects had stalled because Evan kept promising results he couldn't deliver. I gathered everything methodically, making sure every piece connected. I kept all of this to myself. I didn't tell Harvey because I knew he would twist the situation, and I didn't trust Evan to handle the truth. This wasn't about seeking approval or causing chaos. It was about making sure the facts spoke for themselves. Each night, I organized the documents in a folder, arranging them in a way anyone could understand. The more I uncovered, the clearer the picture became. Evan hadn't just exaggerated, he had built his entire image on work that didn't belong to him. The weight of what I found didn't shake me. Instead, it strengthened my resolve. I knew exactly what needed to be done next, and I was prepared to carry it through on my own terms. The truth was finally in my hands, and I wasn't going to let it slip away. A few days later, Evan was buzzing with confidence. He kept talking about how Gregory seemed impressed with him and how he had everything under control at work. He leaned back casually, bragging about minor wins and imagining promotions that weren't coming. I listened quietly, letting him speak, while a smile barely touched my lips. He had no idea I already knew the full truth about his lies and failures. At home, Harvey continued his usual routine of criticism. He made remarks about my career, my choices, even the way I spoke. "You're always so serious, Sarah," he sneered one evening. "Maybe lighten up. You might actually make a friend if you weren't so stiff." His words stung, but I refused to react. I could feel my anger simmering beneath the surface, controlled but relentless. Every laugh from him, every smug glance from Evan, only strengthened my determination. I noticed small details too, the way Evan exaggerated tasks even while describing them to me, the overconfidence he wore like armor. Each moment reinforced the plan I was building in my mind. I didn't confront either of them. I didn't need to. Letting them believe I was fragile and unaware gave me the advantage. The tension between appearances and reality was shifting quietly in my favor. I reminded myself that patience was crucial. One wrong move, and the truth could be dismissed. By the end of that week, I felt a strange mix of calm and intensity. I wasn't scared anymore, and I wasn't hurt in the same way. Instead, I was ready. Every boast from Evan and every jab from Harvey fueled the strategy forming in my mind. Soon, they would see that underestimating me had been a critical mistake. After careful thought, I knew it was time to act. I decided to speak directly with Gregory, but I couldn't let emotions take over. I gathered all the files, notes, and emails I had collected and organized them so every detail was clear. Each piece of evidence showed exactly what Evan had done, leaving no room for excuses. I called Gregory's office and asked for a brief meeting. I kept my tone calm and professional, avoiding any hint of personal vendetta. When I arrived, he greeted me politely, but I could see curiosity in his eyes. I explained that I had observed discrepancies in Evan's work and asked if he would review the documentation I had prepared. As I went through each point, I watched his expression change. His brows furrowed, lips pressed together, and hands hovered over the table as he took in every piece of evidence. The meticulous way I presented the facts made it impossible for him to dismiss anything as exaggeration. Gregory paused after reviewing several files, clearly stunned. "I had no idea," he said quietly. He leaned back, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. "This is serious. Can you provide a full set of the documentation? I need to verify everything and ensure these issues are addressed immediately." I handed him the organized folder, careful to maintain composure. I didn't gloat, I didn't let anger show. This wasn't about revenge in words, it was about truth speaking for itself. Leaving his office, I felt a mix of relief and anticipation. The confrontation wasn't over, but the first step had been taken. Gregory now had everything he needed, and I knew that once he reviewed it thoroughly, Evan would have no way to defend himself. For the first time, I felt that my quiet strategy was moving toward the outcome I had envisioned. Within a few days, Evan started noticing subtle changes at work. His usual confidence wavered when he saw Gregory looking more serious during meetings, asking questions he hadn't expected. He fidgeted through conversations, trying to cover his tracks, but his tone lacked the usual certainty. Something was off, though he couldn't pinpoint exactly what. Back at home, Harvey continued his relentless teasing. "Still brooding, Sarah? Maybe you should try laughing at life for once," he said one evening, smirking as if he'd won some invisible battle. He had no idea that I was quietly orchestrating everything behind the scenes. His gloating only made me more determined, fueling a calm, controlled focus I had never felt before. Evan began double-checking his reports and frantically reviewing past emails. He sensed eyes on him that weren't actually there, imagining that Gregory knew more than he should. I watched him struggle quietly, noting every anxious glance, every slip of confidence, from a distance. His fear was subtle but growing, and it gave me a sense of cautious satisfaction. At the same time, I made sure to stay composed. I didn't confront him or let my actions become obvious. The suspense worked in my favor, letting him unravel on his own without realizing I had set the stage. Each hesitant step he took toward defending himself only made the gap between his facade and the truth wider. I felt a strange mix of patience and anticipation. The moment of reckoning was approaching, and I could see it forming in the small cracks of Evan's confidence. Meanwhile, Harvey remained oblivious, thinking I was still fragile and defeated. In reality, I was preparing for the final move, and nothing could stop what was coming next. A few days later, Gregory called Evan into his office. I stayed nearby, pretending to be helping with a minor task, though inside I was tense with anticipation. Gregory had the evidence I had collected, neatly organized, and he wasted no time. As the meeting began, Gregory laid out the facts calmly but firmly. He showed Evan the missed deadlines, the altered reports, and the client complaints. Each piece of proof was clear and undeniable. Evan's confident mask started to crumble almost immediately. He opened his mouth, but nothing coherent came out. He tried explanations, but they were weak and unconvincing. Every lie he had built on top of another was exposed in front of him. Harvey was standing nearby, having accompanied Evan under the pretense of support. He watched silently, clearly confused, unsure why his son's smooth confidence had vanished. He had no idea that I was the one who had uncovered everything. He had thought I was still fragile, still bruised from earlier humiliation, but I had quietly taken control of the situation. Evan's face turned pale as Gregory continued methodically, pointing out how each falsification had impacted the team's performance. There was no way to shift the blame, no way to hide behind excuses. Gregory's disappointment was evident, and Evan realized that nothing would save him now. By the end of the meeting, Evan was stunned, silent, and defeated. Harvey finally spoke, but his words were empty, trying to mask his confusion. Meanwhile, I stood back, feeling a mix of relief and quiet satisfaction. I hadn't needed to yell or confront anyone personally. The truth had done all the work. For the first time, the balance had shifted, and the consequences Evan deserved were finally unfolding. Gregory didn't hesitate. After reviewing every document, he delivered the verdict without delay. Evan was terminated immediately. The words hit the office like a hammer, final and unyielding. Evan froze, disbelief written across his face, as he realized the full weight of what had just happened. Harvey, who had followed Evan into the room, blinked in shock. His son, the one he had always boasted about to friends and colleagues, was suddenly stripped of his position, his reputation, and the future he imagined. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. For once, his pride was silenced, leaving him exposed and helpless. Evan's hands trembled as he gathered his belongings, the reality of failure pressing down on him. His arrogance had crumbled in front of everyone, and there was no escape from the consequences of his dishonesty. He had built his image on lies, and now the truth had dismantled it entirely. I stayed back, watching the scene unfold quietly. My chest felt light, and for the first time, I didn't need to justify my presence or defend myself. I had endured humiliation, embarrassment, and doubt, but the situation had finally shifted. I had orchestrated this outcome without confrontation, without raising my voice, and without losing my composure. The satisfaction I felt wasn't about revenge for its own sake, it was the quiet victory of truth, of justice delivered, and of seeing fairness restored. Harvey's confusion, Evan's panic, and the stark contrast of my calm composure spoke volumes. In that moment, I realized something important: I didn't need anyone to acknowledge my efforts. The outcome itself was proof enough. The balance had turned, and I finally felt vindicated. Days following Evan's firing, I felt a shift within myself. The tension and doubt that had weighed on me for weeks began to lift. I realized I no longer needed validation from Harvey or anyone else to feel capable. My confidence returned steadily, like sunlight breaking through clouds after a storm. I started making decisions for myself without hesitation, trusting my judgment and abilities. Tasks that once felt intimidating now seemed manageable. Each success, no matter how small, reminded me that I could rely on my own strength. The feeling was liberating, and for the first time in a long while, I felt completely in control of my path. Harvey, on the other hand, had to face consequences he hadn't expected. His constant criticism and sarcasm, which he thought harmless, had revealed cracks in the family dynamic. He watched quietly as I moved forward with assurance, forced to acknowledge that his behavior had not only hurt me but also indirectly exposed Evan's dishonesty. For once, he had no clever remark or sneer to hide behind. I understood that I didn't need his approval, praise, or protection to succeed. I had proven to myself that I could navigate challenges independently and turn setbacks into opportunities. The humiliation I endured no longer held power over me. Instead, it became a source of clarity and resolve. The entire experience reshaped my perspective. I felt lighter, stronger, and more certain about my capabilities. Harvey's presence no longer intimidated me, and Evan's downfall reminded me that integrity mattered more than superficial success. For the first time, I felt fully in charge of my life and proud of the person I had become, knowing I could face any challenge without relying on others' validation. After everything settled, life began to feel lighter. At work, people who had once doubted me started treating me differently. Gregory approached me with genuine respect, acknowledging the effort I had put into exposing the truth. My colleagues listened when I spoke, and I could sense that my reputation for reliability and honesty had grown. I focused on my goals, seizing opportunities one had once hesitated to pursue. Each project I completed reinforced the confidence I had fought so hard to reclaim. I no longer feared judgment or criticism. Instead, I approached challenges with a quiet assurance that I could handle whatever came my way. Harvey, meanwhile, withdrew further into his stubborn pride. He remained wrapped in his own arrogance, failing to understand the damage his words and actions had caused. His presence became less intimidating because his influence over me had evaporated. I didn't need to argue or explain. I simply moved forward, letting my accomplishments speak for themselves. Evan faced the reality of his mistakes. Losing his job was a shock, and he had no choice but to confront the consequences of dishonesty. For the first time, he had to reflect on accountability, integrity, and the importance of earning trust rather than fabricating it. Watching him struggle reminded me how different things could have been if he had acted with honesty from the start. As for me, I felt empowered like never before. The humiliation, the frustration, and the betrayal had transformed into lessons in resilience and self-reliance. I had turned a painful situation into a personal victory. The chapter of family betrayal was closed, and I moved forward with clarity, strength, and independence. The future felt promising, and for the first time I fully trusted myself to create it on my own terms.